Do me a favor, won't you turn to your neighbor, look at your neighbor, look at them in the eye like you're glad to be sitting next to them on this second Sunday of Black History Month. And won't you say to your neighbor, neighbor, it's your time. I'm not sure your neighbor believed you the way you said it, so won't you put your best Sunday morning voice on, clear your throat, and say, neighbor, it's your time. It's your time. In the summer of 1963, in the state of Mississippi, uh, voting rights were not available for Black people. And specifically in the Democratic Party, the party that was trying to be or claiming to be on the forefront, the vanguard of civil rights. This party, who nationally had been advocating for voting rights, other civil liberties being afforded to African American citizens, to the people who built this country. But in Mississippi, the Democratic Party, those who were still part of the old Dixiecratic Party, the Southern Democrats, who many of them, even though they were bankers and lawyers and preachers and deacons during the day, would be willing to put on robes and hoods and terrorize people at night. Some of these people who would actually leave the sanctuaries in the middle of worship to go put on a hood and to put on the cloak to go terrorize people. These members of this party could not see themselves taking the stance, making a vote to allow African Americans, to allow those who they had seen as being less than them, a right to vote in their party. And so in that summer, this summer that was called Freedom Summer, people came down en masse. Starting in 1963, they began a movement to try to register people to vote. When this did not reach much success in '63, they took that fall and that winter to plan for Freedom Summer of 1964. And in '64, in that April, Black Mississippians gathered from around the state in the capital city of Jackson to start this brand new, bold political enterprise. They decided that if the Democratic Party in Mississippi would not listen to their voices, they would create their own party. Yeah. And so they named their party the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And they elected their own state executive committee in declaring that this party was open to all who believed in rights for everybody. Bob Moses, who helped to organize this group, said that this was a political party that we felt would be responsible to the people in an organization that the people could actually control. And so, because they had been excluded from the party meetings, they had their own parallel and public meetings. Their meetings happened on precinct levels, on district levels, and on county levels. They sent news all over the country that they were asking for volunteers to come for Freedom Summer, to come down and to help register people to vote, to come down and to have small workshop sessions and informational meetings, to help inform and influence the local people on every level to come and to be a part of this political process. And people came. They came out to support the party. They came out out even though their bosses did not want them to. They came out even though the people on whose land they worked did not want them to. People risked being fired. They risked being arrested. Some of the people, after they left meetings, were arrested by the police and beaten in jails just for being there, but they still came out. Every week they came out to get information and to come to exercise their right to vote. And then when the National Convention was being held, the National Convention would not recognize the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. They only recognized the state party of Mississippi. And so the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party interrupted the national convening. They came in as a sign of protest and interrupted this and said that no state party should be recognized if it did not allow everybody in the state to be a part of the party, and therefore that the segregated Mississippi State Party should not be recognized. Only the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party should be recognized. Trying to figure out what to do, they called people from the party to testify. One of them was Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer got in front of the people to testify about what she had experienced as a sharecropper, a worker on the land there in Mississippi. Fannie Lou Hamer was not a trained political activist. She was not a politician. She was somebody who worked there and who had tried to exercise her right to vote. She testified to this. The President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, was so afraid of the impact of Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony that he instructed his aides to get him whatever news was happening at that moment in the country and called a national press conference so that the national TV would turn from Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony to cover his press conference so that the nation could not hear Fannie Lou Hamer's story. Then after securing the spotlight for the moment, Lyndon Johnson instructed the members of his party to meet with the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party in order to secure a compromise. So they said, this is the compromise we will give you. We will give you 2 at-large seats. We will not recognize you as the state party, but we will create 2 additional delegates. We will have 2 at-large delegates, members who can be there on the floor and who can cast a vote. And then all night, they argued about whether or not they should take this. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came in and spoke to the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and said, what you have done here is amazing. This is great work that you've done. You have struck a blow for freedom across the country. And so because you have done such a great work, you should take the 2 seats. After they listened to all of the people who gave them advice and listened to Dr. King, then they listened to the voices of the people who were most impacted by it. Yeah. Fannie Lou Hamer is remembered to say, I did not take all of those beatings. I did not get arrested. I did not pay my way to come here for this convention for 2 seats. Right. And so they rejected the offer. They ignored the advice of Dr. King. And they said, if we won't be recognized as the official state party, then we will not take any additional seats. Yeah. And so the next day when the convention held, they got people who were supporters, people who were sympathetic to their cause, who voluntarily gave up their seats to members of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, who went in and on the floor protested the fact that their party was not given voice, was not recognized as the official party. And one by one, as they spoke up, they were taken out of the hall. They went home without securing a victory in that caucus. Yeah. But the next year, the state party of Mississippi was forced by the National Party to desegregate, and opened its doors so that the members of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and all African Americans in the state of Mississippi were eligible to become a part of the state party of Mississippi. I lift that up, friends and family, brothers and sisters, to say that the time for doing the right thing is always present in front of us. The question is, do we have the courage? Are we willing to do the work to do the right thing? The story of Esther in this book, which is not often read in worship, the one book in the Bible, in fact, in which God is not spoken of directly, only referenced in the book of Esther. This book of Esther is written in the time of the exile, when the people of Israel were not in their own homeland, but they had been taken and kidnapped, removed to another region. And there in the land of exile, there was a queen, Queen Vashti, and a queen who rejected her throne because what was asked of her was too much. The king asked her to make a spectacle of herself for the entertainment of his friends. And the queen, refusing the king's order, also refused then her position, was deposed as queen of the land. And so there was an open audition for who would be the next queen. It was the Bachelorette of their time. And so all of these women gathered together trying to audition to be the next queen, to see who would get the red rose from the king in order to be selected as the next queen. And Esther was one of the people who entered into the competition. On advice of her uncle Mordecai, Esther does not divulge her heritage, but she is able to pass. She is able to blend in into the larger culture. And so there in this competition, she wins. She wins the eyes and the hand and the heart of the king. And so she becomes queen. In this, as this is happening, Mordecai tells her, still don't tell anybody who you are. But she would come out of the royal palace and go to the edge of the royal courtyard. And there Mordecai would come and meet with her on the edge of the courtyard. And they would have conversations as he would advise her and give her and speak to her and nurture their relationship together. And one day while Mordecai was waiting for Esther to come, there were two soldiers who were tired of the king. And so they were plotting a coup. Mordecai overhears the plot and tells Esther of the plot. Esther tells the king, and the king discovers that this is true. And the two traitors are taken care of in the way that traitors work. And so now Mordecai has gotten the respect of the king. The scripture goes on to say that there was a man named Haman. Haman got promoted. He got elevated into a position. And the king said, Haman's position is so important that everybody in the kingdom who is not a part of the royal court, everybody else in the kingdom should bow down to Haman. So Mordecai was coming to make his visit towards the courtyard to visit Esther, and he crossed paths with Haman, and Haman looks at him and says, you should bow down to me because the king has declared that everybody should bow down. Mordecai says, I refuse to bow before any person. And so Haman gets mad at Mordecai, gets so angry, his pride gets the best of him, and he decides that he's not going to just take this out on Mordecai, but he's going to take this out on all of Mordecai's people. So he finds out who is Mordecai, who is his family, and learns that Mordecai is a Jew. Mordecai is from the people of Israel. And so he says, well, we're going to extinguish all of the people of Israel who are here in our borders. We're going to eliminate them all and so he talks to the king and says, there are people in our borders, people who have strange customs, people who come from foreign lands, people who are criminals who are among us. And we should have built a wall to keep them out. But since we did not build a wall to keep them out, let us round them up in cages. Let's separate the children from their parents. Let's round them up. Let's criminalize them, and then let's execute them all. And so the king agrees with Haman and allows his plan to move forward. Word of this goes around, and then Esther sends to Mordecai the message that Haman is setting this trap, and he's going to start it by killing you. He's going to convince somebody to lie about you at a public dinner. And when they lie about you, then he's going to take that opportunity to execute you and then execute all of the Jewish people. Wow. So then Mordecai sends back a word to Esther, you've got to intervene. You've got to do something about this. And Esther says, look, I would like to do that. I really wish I could help. But there is a law in place that you can't just go talk to the king. Even though I am the queen, I'm not allowed to just go in there and speak to him on my own. I have to be summoned by the king. The king has to extend his scepter toward me in order for me to come in and speak. And it's been over a month since I've been able to even talk to the king. If I go in there without an invitation, I could die. And Mordecai sends the message back to Esther that opened our pericope, where Mordecai says to Esther, look, you don't have to get involved. But don't think that by not getting involved, you will be safe. Because God will send deliverance from somewhere. And everyone will be saved, but you and your family will still be in peril. And then he reminds her, perhaps you have been appointed to the royal court for such a time as this. It's your time. Friends and family, I want to say that in the face of these political times that we are in, there is so many reasons why one should want to run and hide. I can understand the feeling, the sentiment of wanting to turn off the television. Even one of the candidates for president said that all of the news that's happening around the White House makes him want to turn off the TV and turn on cartoons. I can understand the feeling of dismay. I can understand the feeling of despair. I can understand the feeling of apathy as we have heard evidence of this president's crimes in colluding with a foreign power to investigate his political enemies for his own political gain. That has come on top of the evidence that this president has lied to the American people about numerous things, not the least of which is the fact that this president is getting richer in his position, not just because of the salary that he earns at taxpayer expense, but because he has not relinquished the holdings of his property. And whenever he travels to his own estate, which seems to be every week now, whenever he travels to his own place, that the Secret Service is charged somewhere around $650 per room per day to stay there to keep him safe. And so he is doubly benefiting not only from the money that is due to him by virtue of his position by salary, but also the money that he is forcing the Secret Service to spend at his estate when he goes to stay there. Not only that, friends and family, but we also have heard that this president has sent military units instead of staying at the bases where they have normally stayed or staying at locations where they have normally stayed while traveling overseas, that he has diverted them to his own properties. To properties he has in Europe, to properties he has in Asia, to properties he has in these in other countries. He has diverted them there so that he is benefiting also from military spending in his place. That this president is using his property as a way for foreign leaders to curry favor with him. If you want to get the ear of the president, when you come to Washington, D.C., you have to stay at his hotel. You have to have you and your embassy stay there at his hotel, and then you will get the president's ear. With all of this that we are hearing about how corrupt our president is, how he is manipulating the Constitution, subverting it, and the refusal of the Republican Party, with the one exception of Mitt Romney, the refusal of the Republican Party to even entertain listening to witnesses to hear about the president's crimes, and then to, without listening to what has happened, they have closed their ears and voted to acquit the president, giving him carte blanche to act however he wants to. It is easy to look at what is happening and say, there's nothing that we can do. Here in Cincinnati, far from what is happening in Washington, D.C., there's nothing that we can do about this. That here we're having problems getting our own city government to listen to the voice of the people. That our own city government ignored the voice of the people in the West End who said they did not want a soccer stadium to come, and voted against the will of the people to allow FC Cincinnati to put their soccer stadium in the neighborhood that they don't want it. If we can't even get our city government to listen to us, what hope is there with the nation? It's easy to give up, to throw up our hands and surrender, friends and family. But I want to impress upon you the lesson that is here in this biblical text, the lesson that is in the story of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. The message that says that there is no situation that is hopeless. There is no situation that is too big, friends and family, but that what we do matters. It is that great patriot Angela Davis who says that you have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. That we are called, friends and family, to live, to act, to speak, to move in a prophetic way, particularly in this day and time. And so the question is, how do we do it? How do we summon the courage to act? How can we act in the face of all that is happening? And I think there are three lessons I want to lift up from the story of Esther to help us. The first is that Esther, even when her position changes, that she still maintains relationship with those who are the most vulnerable. It would have been easy for Esther when she got promoted, when she got chosen, when she was selected to be the queen, to cut her ties from her heritage, to ignore all of those because nobody knew who she was anyway. She could have changed her name, changed her address, changed her contact information, moved away from everybody, separated the final cord that held her to her people, ignored Mordecai, and been there solely living in the palace. She could have adopted palace talk, adopted palace walk, thought in the way that people in the palace thought. She could have done everything to fit in and forgotten who she was. But Esther does not do that. Esther realizes, at least intrinsically, at least on the inside, she realizes that how she got to this place was by honoring who she was. Even if she doesn't say it out loud, she honors it on the inside. And so she does not separate herself from the people that helped to get her there. She remembers her uncle who gave her advice. She remembers her family who has stood behind her. And so she continues to meet with him even once she is in the walls. Friends and family, everything in the United States, everything in America, everything about the road to prosperity tells us that when we achieve a certain level of economic status, once we achieve a certain level of security, once we achieve a certain level of status, that we ought to separate ourselves from everybody who is not a part of that, from everyone who does not fit into this new way of life, to this new circle, people who don't think like that. We ought to separate ourselves from them. And we see it all the time. We see it in social media. We see it in the way people act. We see it on the way people show up on their jobs, that people get to a place and they try to forget everything that got them there, friends and family. But I want you to remember that we did not get where we are on our own. We didn't make it here on our own. That somebody prayed for us. Somebody encouraged us. Somebody helped us. Somebody made sacrifices for us. Somebody went out of their way to make sure that we were able to get where we are. I would guess if we took time to invite you to think back over the course of your life and offer testimony, that you would have more people than you could name, more names than you could remember, more people who have helped you than we have time to hear in this service, friends and family, because at each opportunity, God has sent people in our lives to help open doors for us, to help lift us up, to pray us through, friends and family. And that's only the people we know. That's not even counting the people who prayed for you who you never met, the people who prayed for you to be here who never saw your face or never knew your name, but in their spirit they knew you were coming, and so they prayed that doors would be open. They prayed that obstacles would fall. They prayed that God would provide a way for you to be where you are today. So because somebody prayed for you, we ought not forget those. We ought not forget those who prayed for us. We ought not forget those who helped us to get here. We ought not forget those who are still struggling to get a piece of what we have. Esther does not separate herself from her heritage, from her people, from the people who are the most vulnerable. The second thing that we see how we can act to seize the time that is before us. How do we act with hope in a time that seems hopeless? The second thing we see that Esther does is that Esther takes advice from and is instructed by the people whose lives are at stake. Esther could have taken a different route. And I'm sure if she had listened to her own staff, to the people who were provided by the king to make sure that she was well informed of the customs of the royal palace, that they would have told her something different. But she does not take her final advice from the people in the palace. But she listens to the voice of the people whose lives are the most at stake. Friends and family, when we remember the story of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, can you imagine the pressure when the President of the United States offers you a compromise? And Martin Luther King Jr., who is fresh off of the I Have a Dream speech, who has a Nobel Peace Prize. Martin Luther King Jr. walks into the room and applauds you. And says, you did good. Congratulations. Now take the compromise. But the people did not listen to the President of the United States. And they didn't even listen to Dr. King. But they listened to the people who had the most at stake in the process. And Fannie Lou Hamer, this sharecropper from Mississippi, this person who never won a Nobel Peace Prize, this person who never spoke before millions of people, this person who Time Magazine never recognized as Person of the Year. They listened to Fannie Lou Hamer, who said, I did not get arrested and beaten for 2 seats. Friends and family, we are called all of the time to act in compromised ways, to act in ways that make it possible for the oppression that happens to continue to happen. We are encouraged all of the time to close our eyes and to shut our ears and act as if what is happening is not happening. We are encouraged at all times to just go along with the system. This week in the State of the Union, the President of the United States tried to demonize entire cities that were sanctuary cities as being supportive of criminals. And the entire state of California, which is a sanctuary state, he tried to demonize as being a criminal state, a state that harbors criminals. Friends and family, and in this time, as our democracy is being challenged, we will continue to hear the rhetoric of people who are moving us inch by inch closer to an autocratic fascist government. We will hear them calling to us and saying, trying to stoke our fears, and saying that if we allow the democratic process to continue, if we allow people's voices to be heard, if we do not move towards a more authoritarian state, then people's lives will be at risk. They will tell us of the dangers. They will try to speak to our fears. They will try to divide us from one another, friends and family. But we have to listen not to the voice that's coming out of the White House, not to the voice that's coming out of the Senate. We've got to listen not to the voices of the pollsters and the talking heads on CNN or MSNBC, and God help us, please, not Fox News. We've got to listen, friends and family, not to what's happening, to what's being written in the New York Times or the USA Today or the Cincinnati Enquirer, but we have to listen to the voices of the people who are most vulnerable right now. What's being said by the people who are trying to cross the border to escape from tyranny of their government to try to find freedom. People who have heard the invitation of the United States, bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, and have risked everything to accept that invitation only to come to this land and find a sign that says no occupancy. What do we say to those people? What are they saying to us? What is being said by the children who are being separated from their parents at the border? In this land of democracy, this land of so-called freedom, what do their voices tell us? What's being said by our friends and family, our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated right now? Those who are being jailed for drug offenses while state after state is making it legal and now profiting off of the same drugs that people are still in jail for. What is being said by their voices? We need to listen to the voices of the people who are on the margins. What about the mothers who do not have a job, who are surviving on welfare in order to be able to feed their family? What is being said by those individuals, people who are in Section 8 housing, who are living there, who are separated from the rest of the city and separated from the resources that make it possible for people to survive and thrive? What are their voices saying to us?
Those are the people who have to instruct us. Those are the people who have to inform our decisions. That when we are in relationship with those people and their voices are the ones that guide us, and it makes it possible for us to operate as if there is hope even in hopeless times.
Yeah.
Friends and family, what I've realized is that the temptation to apathy is so much greater when it's not somebody you love whose life is at stake.
Yeah.
But when you know the people whose life is at stake.
Come on.
When they have your phone number, when they can text you, when they can call you, when they are the ones who are talking to you, it's so much harder to give up. But then we find ways to courageously act, because it's not just an abstract problem that's happening over there. It's somebody who I know.
Yes.
Somebody whose face I've seen, somebody whose voice I hear, somebody who I am in a relationship with, who calls to me, who can hold me accountable. It's the people, it's those people. Then it is harder to give up hope.
Yes. Amen.
Queen Esther finds the courage to face her fear. She's not without fear. You can hear it as she's trying to explain to Mordecai her situation. She has her fear. The challenge in front of her is real, but she finds the strength to face her fear because she knows that the people she loves, their lives are on the line.
Yes.
Friends and family. And so she remains close to people who are the most vulnerable. And then she is advised by people who are the most vulnerable. And the last thing I want to lift up from this text is that Queen Esther remembers what Mordecai instructs her, reminds her, that where she is now is not by accident. It's not by circumstance. It's not by happenstance. It's not a coincidence. But where she is now, at this moment, when this crisis is happening, is a divine appointment. Mordecai says, who knows, perhaps the reason why you won the beauty pageant, the reason why you were chosen to be the queen, perhaps the reason why the king looked past everybody and chose you is that God had selected you to be in this position at this time.
Yes, Lord.
Friends and family, I want to let you know that wherever you find yourself right now, I want to impress upon you that maybe it's not just an accident.
Okay.
Maybe you're not where you are just by chance. Maybe it's not just by coincidence.
Okay.
I know you've worked hard to get where you are, but I want to suggest that maybe it's not all your hard work. I know you've made sacrifices to get where you are, but I want to say that maybe it's not just all your sacrifices. I know you're talented and I know you're smart, but I want to say that maybe it's not all your smarts and your talent. Because there are a lot of smart, talented people who are not where you are. You're not the smartest person and you're not the most talented, but you are where you are because God has given you favor to be there, and maybe, just maybe, the appropriate response to God's favor is not to come to church and thank God for God's favor, not to sing songs and celebrate God's favor, but perhaps, maybe, just maybe, the appropriate response to God's favor is to use that favor on behalf of somebody else. use that favor for somebody who doesn't have access to it, to use your position for somebody who can't be there, to use where you are to open the door for somebody to walk behind you, to use where you are to create opportunities for other people to be there. Perhaps God has placed you where you are so that in this moment, when we're facing this crisis, that you can use your position to do something that nobody else can do. And you can use your wisdom, you can use your experience, you can use your talents to do something that nobody else can do. Friends and family, the Bible is full of people who are called to step into critical moments, to act boldly and courageously. It's Moses who is called from being a shepherd at his father-in-law's farm to go back to Egypt to deliver God's people out of slavery. Because Moses has the education, Moses has the experience, and Moses has the anger. So God calls Moses to leave his job as a farmer and go back to Egypt to get God's people out of slavery. Our friends and family, it's Joshua who's called not to sit on the sidelines after Moses finally retires, but Joshua is called to step up as one of the few people who was with Moses to come out of Egypt. That Joshua is called to lead the people into a new promised land. Friends and family, there was a priestess by the name of Deborah. Deborah was a priest and who the general came to Deborah and said, I need to know if I'm going to go fight our enemies that God is with me. And she says, go and know that God is with you. And he says, I won't go by myself, but I need you to come with me. Because you know what they say, that going with every strong man is a strong woman. And so Brock says, I'm not going to go by myself, but I need you, Deborah, to walk with me. Because if you're with me, then I know God is with me. And so Deborah walks with Barak as he goes into battle. Friends and family, that God calls people at special times to come and step in. When King Nebuchadnezzar got full of himself and thought that he could decide who people worship and when people worship, God called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego not to bow down before the altar that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, not to bow down before the statue, but to remind King Nebuchadnezzar that you can erect a statue of gold, but ultimately it is God who sits high and looks low. Friends and family, and when nobody else could step in to do the work that needed to be done, when heaven and history were standing at the crossroads, God himself stepped out of heaven and stepped into earth in human flesh in the person of Jesus Christ. And God did what no one else could do. God came down and walked with us and talked with us, taught us how to live with each other and love each other. God came and fed the hungry and clothed the naked. He came and healed the blind and made the lame to walk. He came and raised Jairus' daughter and Lazarus from the dead. And when he had convinced the people that God was with them, when he had convinced them that they did not have to submit to Roman oppression, they arrested Jesus. They hung him on a cross from the 6th to the 9th hour. When he had breathed his last breath, they put him in a borrowed tomb and sealed the tomb with a stone. But on early Sunday morning, just about the break of day, Jesus got up with all power in his hands. And because Jesus got up, you can stand up. You can speak up. You can step up. Because Jesus got up, you can get up and confront the powers that challenge us this time. Because it's your time. It's your time. It's your time. This is your time. It's not time to sit back. It's not time to shut your eyes. This is your time to stand up and to speak up. We have a practice here at Beloved Community Church that we call response to the word.
Mm.